Hello, and welcome to the Grit and Grace podcast. I am your host, Tonya Bruton, and I'm so glad that you're here listening today. I pray this episode finds you well and blessed in the Lord. Today, my special guest is my friend, Brian McAleer, and today we're going to tackle a tough but real subject, and that's grief, loss, and trauma. And we're going to explore finding ways to deal with grief every day because sometimes time doesn't heal all wounds, but there is hope, and we'll look at that today. Brian, thanks for coming on. Please come on and introduce yourself for our listeners.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tonya. Really great to be on your podcast. So as you said, my name's Brian McAleer. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and have lived here my whole life. A fellow podcaster as well, all about movies. And you were kind enough to come and be a guest of mine a little while ago. We had a good time there. And I work in a few different roles. I work as a teacher slash trainer for an educational institute here in Melbourne called Box Hill TAFE, which for your American listeners, I guess is the equivalent of, say, like community college, something like that.
Hmm.
I also work as a life and career coach, mostly with young adults, and I'm also a writer. I write film reviews, obviously. I've got a book out doing the rounds around goal setting. It's been out for nearly 10 years and just a few other creative projects like that. And I'm married and I have three daughters, and I live in the outer eastern suburbs of Melbourne, near an area called the Yarra Ranges, which is really nice. There's lots of hills and wineries and that kind of thing. And that's me in a nutshell, really. Yeah.
Well, it's a really, and I find it interesting how we met. I didn't
Yeah.
really, I don't know if I had a chance after we spoke really to tell you how I felt, but let me just kind of clue the listeners in here. Brian has a podcast called My Movie Story, and and he was looking for guests to come on and talk about, well, there's three different kind of movies, but essentially your three favorite movies or that it impacted you or whatever. And now me with my excuse me, with my trauma affecting me like it does sometimes, I chose three movies in which all the characters die, or not all the characters I remember. There's a character that dies in every
Yeah.
movie I chose, and
Yep.
but those happened. I mean, those just happened to be the ones that I cling to for whatever reason, and because I mean, I've had a child. I've lost a child, and I don't know if that's why, and then I've also had two of my children. Um, I don't know if I told you this, Brian, but two of my children
Hmm.
were born very sick. So one
Yes.
one of
Yeah.
them had a liver transplant. She's 31 now, but she's still sick. She's actually had three organ transplants, two liver and one kidney, and she's been
Jeez,
in and
yeah.
out of hospitals her whole entire life. But you thank the Lord that we haven't lost her, and everything. But it's just I can relate to almost losing her, and then I can relate to the fact that I have lost a child, and what would I know what would be in store for me if I did lose that child, and it's just a lot. There's a lot of emotion in there.
Yep.
But anyways,
There is. Yep.
I didn't know. I'm talking to you on your podcast, like um I'm the only one here that understood what's going on. And
Yeah.
and then you revealed to me some of your story, and I felt kind of I didn't know how I felt, but I'm so glad though that you wanted to come on here and discuss that with me. I mean, I thought that was really brave of you.
Oh,
Um
thank you.
and yeah, and very tactful how you handled me.
Yeah. Well, I had to. You came on as my guest, so I wanted to make it all about you, and it was a great interview and a great chat. So yeah, I thought, well, I'll return the favor, and here I am. So
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about your family, and let's talk about Lucy, and kind of take us to the beginning, as far as your journey.
sure. Yeah, well, so my wife and I are the parents of three girls, and our eldest child, Lucy, was born back in 2013. Then we had Olivia a couple of years later, and then about a 4 year gap there of house changes, job changes, and then our third addition to the family, Amelia, came along in 2019. Unfortunately, Amelia sort of spent most of the first couple of years of her life in lockdown because it was the pandemic.
Mm.
But she's making up for it now, running around and making herself known everywhere she goes. So, so that hasn't set her back too much. Yeah, so it was quite ironic that I had only girls as a father because I grew up with just sisters as well. So I had women around me my whole life. And a lot of guys would say, "Oh, you must be an expert," and I'm like, "No, I'm not. There are no experts." But I've been very proud to be a father of three girls. Yeah, so they've definitely uh, brought a lot of joy to my life, and yeah, very proud of all of them.
Right. I
Yeah.
have an Amelia as
Yes,
well.
that's right.
So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yep.
So so what happened was this about a year ago Lucy got sick?
Yeah. Just a little over 2 years ago, she was diagnosed. So it was July 2021, and we were in for for people who are not sure who might be listening, in Melbourne, Australia, where I live, we had some of the, if not the most strictest COVID lockdown and restrictions in the whole world. So our state premier at the time decided to lock us down for months at a time, and we could only travel like a 5 kilometer radius. And this went on for months and months and months, and in hindsight, longer than it should have. And it definitely was a very stressful time for everyone. And in particular for those of us living in Melbourne. And it was at the peak of this, July 2021, where we noticed there was something wrong with Lucy physically, and her eyes were looking a bit droopy, her speech was a bit slurry, and she was at a basketball game because she loved to play basketball. Got bumped in the head with a ball, and then my wife took her to a local public hospital where not much happened, unfortunately. The next day, she went to our local GP, who straight away was like, "Okay, go and get a scan." So then Lucy was taken to the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, which we're very lucky to have. It's one of the best children's hospitals in the world. And we're on top of that, we're extra lucky in Australia where it's all free, and it's all covered by donations and things like that. So we're very fortunate to have such a great hospital. Anyway, she went to hospital, they did a scan, and kind of in the back of our minds, my wife Nicole and I had this sinking feeling that, it was something in the mind and in the brain. And your first thought is tumor. And yeah, our worst fears were realized when we were told it was a brain tumor. We didn't know much about brain cancer prior to that. Um, my nephew actually had a benign brain tumor when he was very young, nearly 20 years ago now. But it wasn't cancerous, and he was able to have that operated on and partially removed, and he's doing fine now. So that was my experience of it. And then they told us it's something called DIPG, which we'd never heard of. And that stands for diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. And there's another tumor similar to that called DMG. And these tumors are very rare. They seem to appear only in children of a certain age, between, say, the ages of like 8 to 12. In some rare cases, some teenagers can receive it. And in very, very rare cases, there's been adults diagnosed with it. But typically, it is children. And even though children are continuing to be diagnosed with it, it is one of the lesser diagnosed brain tumors. It is quite rare. As I said, we'd never heard of it. Everyone we've told about it since has never heard of it until we've told them all about it. And it's a brain tumor that appears on the brain stem, so the base of the uh, skull, top of the spine, in that section, which is very difficult because it can't be operated on because of where it is. even doing a biopsy would be risky because of the location and the connection to the brain and the spine is, central to everything in your body. If that's affected, then the body and the brain just shut down. And it's incurable, can't be removed, it can only be treated with radiotherapy. So we were told about this, and we were told the likelihood of Lucy's survival, which was very, very rare. Something like 98.9% of children who receive this pass away, lose their battle. There is a girl who's been diagnosed and about 4 years ago who's still fighting, and that's extremely rare though. Once a child is diagnosed with this, it's essentially a death sentence. Unfortunately, there's not much that can be done for it. So that was her diagnosis, and then we were trying to process all of this, figure out how to deal with it, how to tell Lucy as well. She had just turned 8 at the time. And then we went into the treatment phase from there. And then that's really where her journey began.
Yeah. Can I ask? Oh, without, how did you tell her?
Um, we we had some great support at the hospital where right after the diagnosis, when we were told the news, they appointed us some professionals to help us, like a social worker, an oncologist, these people who specialize in this. And we were told to, use really however we wanted to explain it to her. So my wife and Nicole and I chatted about it, and we said that, she has something in her brain called cancer. We'd never spoken to her about cancer before. Her great grandmother had passed away a few years before this from cancer at the age of 90. I'm going to say 96, 95 or 96. I can't remember exactly. So we told her that she'd had cancer, and that sometimes people who get old get sick, get cancer. So this was a type of cancer and was in her brain, and that was what had made her sick. That's why, she had the sore head and all of these kind of things. So we just tried to keep it as simple as possible. We said to her that she would have to have a special treatment to try and get rid of it. And that was about as much as we told her at that point, that
Yeah,
we felt we could tell her that she would understand.
right.
And being an 8-year-old girl, being really resilient and knowing, really no fear or anything, she was just like, oh, okay. And the hospital, provided us with some books that she could read or that we could read to her, and as well as her younger sisters about what cancer meant. And that was how we explained it to her. And then within about a week after her being diagnosed, we started treatment, our radiotherapy treatment at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Institute in Melbourne. And that was every day for every weekday for 6 weeks. So it was like 35 sessions of that in a row. And this was still during lockdown. So that was a difficult process, but we got through that. And we told her the point of that was to make the cancer smaller or to go away, which in essence, that's what it does. It tries to shrink it and reduce it, create a bit of relief for her. So that was about all we told her. And, she had a good days and her bad days during that treatment process. And but being an 8-year-old kid, she just was very resilient and just pushed through. And yeah, that's I guess as much as we could tell her really, because we
Yeah,
were we were just learning about it ourselves. We'd never heard of DIPG
right.
until the day we were told she had it, and then it was this massive learning curve for us.
And, I don't know how you felt, but when they told me that my 8-month-old daughter had what's called, you said a name I've never heard of. I'll say a name you've never heard of, biliary atresia. And it's
Right.
it's where you're born without the common bile duct that drains your liver to your small intestine. And had it been caught earlier, there's a special procedure they could do to prolong your life until a transplant. But we didn't catch it like that. And so they tell you, your child has this rare disease so rare that it only happens to one in every, I don't know how many thousand people. And I don't know about you, but I was like, well, then why
Yeah,
me? Why me though? Like,
yeah, of
oh,
course.
that was so frustrating, like only
Yep.
one in so many thousands of people get this, and I'm that one.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
was so frustrating. But as
Yeah.
35 weeks of essentially chemo treatments, correct? That had to be a little traumatic, especially like you say
Mhm.
during the lockdown. But
Yeah.
that makes her sick, right? A little. I mean, does it kind of also have its side effects?
No, this unfortunately radiotherapy treatment, so it's not chemotherapy, it's not anything like that. So
Oh,
there's
okay.
no yeah, there's no pain associated with it.
Oh, okay.
Essentially, Lucy went in, and the start of all of that was she lay on this bed, and she has to be the child has to be completely still for this process. It
Uh-huh.
lasts about maybe 10 minutes, so it's quite quick.
Okay.
So really little kids, usually they have to give them an anesthetic because they just can't keep still. But
Yeah.
Lucy she was great from the beginning. She lay completely still. They create this special mask, which is a cast of their face and their neck. So she would have to wear that on her to keep her still, and that also creates some protection from the radiation of the radiotherapy. And she'd lie on this bed, and it would move a bit and do this entire procedure. Essentially, it was sending the radiotherapy targeting the brainstem where the tumor was. And at first it was for her, it was kind of a bit of a novelty. Like she would lie there, and the room that it's in, it's just her in the room. No one else could be in there because of the radiotherapy, but we could watch through a window. They could put on music for her. There was lighting and colors in the room that made it calming and relaxing, that sort of thing. And then she would come out, and she would be fine, and she would con us into taking her to the cafe at this place, which sold lots of cakes and treats and milkshakes, and we were allowed to. It was a certain point of the lockdown where cafes were open. For most of our lockdowns, cafes would only do takeaway, and same with restaurants, as I'm sure you would remember. It
Yeah.
was like that pretty much everywhere.
Hmm.
So we would take her up to this cafe, and then it was in and out, and in some cases we were there and done in less than 3 hours. We had to drive into the city, which is about a 45, 50-minute drive from where we live. And then yeah, we could only have two adults attend at a time because of the restrictions. And one adult would have to wait in the waiting area, and one adult could go into the room with Lucy and then wait just outside to collect her. So yeah, we kind of organized this schedule where it was one day it was my wife and I, other days it was just me or just my wife, as well as Lucy's grandparents on both sides. My parents and Nicole's parents would take turns taking her in as well. And we sort of took it in shifts, and that was how we did it. But it wasn't too traumatic for her. There wasn't really any pain associated with it. And fortunately, it did reduce her tumor by about 40%. So it did give her some relief for a few months.
That's good. And it sounds like you
Yeah.
had some good family support there for you and the other girls.
Oh, yeah. We're extremely lucky. Our parents and Nicole's parents living quite closely. My parents lived a bit further out, but that didn't stop them. They were on hand and ready to help whenever they wanted, and also the local community and the parents at this girls' school as well in kindergarten. So we had a lot of support. So we were very lucky.
And yes, and how important is that when you're going through that? Because as the parent, I mean, I don't know, with me, you're grieving already, or I was
Yeah.
at the possibility or the probability of what was ahead of me. But at the same
Hmm.
time, you've got to be in the right now, and you've got to be there for the
Yeah.
child and also be there for the other children and what they need at the time, and be there for your wife. And um
That's right.
yeah, so how important
Mm.
was that support for you?
Oh, extremely important. And from helping with picking up and dropping off the younger two daughters, or just taking them for the day to go and have some fun while Nicole and I did the all the hospital stuff and appointment stuff. from helping with meals and this was lockdown, so you weren't at certain points you weren't allowed to go into people's houses. That's how strict it was. Um, but you could drop things off at the front door. So one of the local parents organized this small refrigerator to be left at our door, which was plugged in, running through a cord into the garage, and people would come by with food they'd cooked for us and pop it in this fridge slash freezer. So that was really helpful, and so we were never short of food. And then the other thing that people did, my sister organized a GoFundMe account. I'm not sure if you have that website in America, GoFundMe, but
Yes, yes.
you do, yeah. So basically, that was set up, and within a few weeks, hundreds of people, mostly those we knew, and some we didn't know, donated money, and in the vicinity of tens of thousands of dollars, it was raised in a few weeks. So that meant we could take a bit of time off work in the future without worrying about having to pay bills. So yeah, everyone really rallied around us at a time which was really strange and difficult because we are all still in lockdown, and everyone still had their challenges of being in lockdown, and people were out of work, people had COVID, people were dealing with mental health issues because of the pandemic, but everyone still found time to help us, which is, we're eternally grateful for that.
And did COVID and the restrictions get in the way of your services for Lucy?
In part, yeah. So I guess on the plus side, with that phase where we were taking her into the city for treatment for 6 weeks, the roads were very quiet because everyone was in lockdown. So the drive in was pretty swift. Um, I was fortunate enough to continue to be able to work online, being a teacher, so that was fine. Once she'd had treatment and created a bit of relief, we were linked in with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and they got in touch with us and asked Lucy, "What would you love to do?" And she said, "I just want to go and see turtles, sea turtles." She was right into sea turtles at the time.
Oh,
And then they went and had a bit of a chat and came back to us and said, "Well, Lucy, there's this place up in Queensland in Australia, which is like Florida, I suppose. It's
uh-huh.
nice and warm and sunny and lots of beaches and that sort of thing. And there's a place there called SeaWorld,
Right.
which
We have that.
everyone knows, of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone knows. Yeah, we've got a SeaWorld in Australia. I've been to the one in America, the two in America, San Diego and Florida. They were incredible. We've got one in Australia as well. And they said, "How would you like to go to SeaWorld?" And then the Make-A-Wish Foundation organized this massive holiday for us to go up to Queensland, flights, a car hire, 5 or 6 nights at this resort right in the heart of Surfers Paradise, which is the main area up there. Um, a limousine to take us anywhere we wanted one day. Access to 3 different theme parks with different special experiences at the theme parks, which included feeding the turtles, meeting the dolphins, holding koalas. You name it. It was all included. Some spending money, and we told our family, we're doing this as soon as we can. But the thing with the COVID restrictions was that all the borders were shut, so we couldn't travel interstate. So we were just hoping that something would open because we were quite limited with what we could do. And another part of the diagnosis is in one way or another, the doctors and the medical team will say to you, once she's feeling better and she's got some relief, go there and have as much fun as you can. The saying, I don't think they said this to us directly, but essentially they're like, go and make some memories.
Right.
Go and use this time you've got and do something fun. And we were like, of course we will, like we want to spend as much quality time with her as we can. And the radiotherapy gave her some relief and she was sort of back to normal for a few months. But, and we planned this trip on the basis that we could go, but it was just a matter of wait and see if that state decides to open up their borders. Thankfully, they did, and most of our family came up with us, including both sets of parents, my sisters. My sister who already lives up there met us, which was great. And we all hung out in this resort for a week and just spent time with Lucy. So once we were there, we were able to do some really fun stuff. And And most of us managed to escape COVID here in Victoria, where it was pretty bad. But half of us came back from Queensland with COVID,
Oh
so we
no.
had to go interstate to get COVID. So everyone came back and was quite crook and everything. Luckily, Lucy didn't get it. And we were yeah, we were out there. We had a fantastic experience. We managed to get that trip in, so we were very, very lucky that the borders opened just in time. So, but during the days when she was okay, the COVID restrictions made a lot of things weren't available and were or limited or just unavailable altogether. So that did impact our chances to go and do a lot of stuff with her, unfortunately.
Mm, I see.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I see. But what a great opportunity for some memories, I guess that will last a
Oh, yeah.
lifetime.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was an incredible trip. Yeah. It was lots of fun. Lots of fun. Yeah.
Well, Brian, losing a child is an unimaginable pain. I don't know if anybody could even imagine it unless they've been through it. But how have
Mhm.
you been navigating through the grief and loss since Lucy's passed?
Yeah, it is unimaginable. It is like, what you said, until it happens to you, and you never think it will happen to you,
No,
and then it does.
right,
You hear of these things, you hear of these families and people who lose a child, and you're like, oh gosh, how horrible that is. And it is horrible. It's something that no parent should ever have to experience outliving their child. It just doesn't make sense.
mm,
And I guess there's different circumstances under how a child can die, but like you were mentioning before, the anger, like why Lucy, why my daughter, why would she get this brain tumor that's just come out of nowhere? And why is it inoperable? Why can't it be treated? With the technology and medicine that we have today, of all the different types of cancer out there that can be treated and in some cases beaten, why does she have to get this one? And she's only 8, so a lot of those kind of questions were coming up, and they talk about the different stages of grief, and anger was certainly there in the early days, and that anger and despair, like, why has this happened, and how are we going to live without her, and how are we going to be as a result of this, and what I've learned from grief is that it's different for everybody. They speak about the stages of grief, but they do not necessarily come in any particular order.
right,
They don't have a certain time frame. It's not like you move through them in this really linear way. You can
right,
be okay one day, and then the next day you just don't feel like getting out of bed, or facing the world. So there's certainly been a lot of days and weeks like that, where I struggled to get off to work. Being a teacher, there was some components of what I was teaching, that were triggering, and I had to take some breaks from teaching here and there and just do some more kind of work in the background. Um, what really has helped me get through it is knowing that you're never alone. Even though you can feel alone in your grief, you are never alone. Um, and that there is communities of people out there who have experienced what you have, who've lost a child. And I think people tend to gravitate towards other families and parents who've lost their children in similar circumstances, because then
mm-hmm,
you can sort of relate a little bit more.
mm-hmm,
And we've been supported by these great cancer foundations here in Australia. The majority of families and parents who are accessing them, their child is going through the treatment. Very not as often do we meet other bereaved parents. We do meet them from time to time, and we've certainly connected with them on Facebook, other parents, and we've met a few other parents who've lost their child to DIPG as well. So connecting with those parents has been really helpful because it is such a rare type of cancer, and the circumstances of it are so harsh and brutal. It's just really quick. It comes along, and within months, your child's gone, and there's really nothing you can do but just watch it happen. So finding other parents we could relate to about that has been really helpful. Um, Yeah, making sure, for me personally, making sure I just talk to people and access support. My circle of mates have been great the whole way through. And, I know I can always, whatever's going on, I can always get together with them and we can have a laugh. And we've been away camping a couple of times and they would always send me text messages and check in. My sisters have been incredible. My parents and Nicole's family, they've all been great. And just what's helped is when people don't try and, rationalize about the grief with you or, give you an answer, but just say, you know what, I'm here if you need me. And
Oh,
that's
that's
all,
good. That's good.
yeah, that's all a parent wants to hear.
Yeah.
We want to be heard. Some days we just need to vent and talk about how we feel. And then just having someone there to listen and be like, I'm here for you. What do you need or what can I do for you? Is That's been really helpful. And that's the majority of the main way people have supported us is that kind of being a shoulder to cry on and stuff. So yeah, I think accessing support, realizing you're not alone is really important. Doing activities that help you heal and process it.
Uh-huh.
For me being a writer, journaling has always been a big part of my life. So I've journaled a lot about my experiences with grief. Um, I've even written letters to Lucy, just asking her how she is and how I'm feeling. So I kind of have these conversations with her,
Oh, that's
which
nice.
helps me. And visiting her grave as well,
Uh-huh.
with the family. Sometimes I've gone alone. I'll sit there and just, have a chat with her about how I'm feeling and stuff. Um, and I think, yeah, just finding ways to finding out creative outlets as well. I think a big part of my healing this year has been getting back to my creative roots and launching my podcast this year, which I launched in July of 2023, has been really helpful as well. And it's helped me explore some movies around the topic of grief and the loss of a child as well. So that's been a good part of the healing process too.
Good. Yes. And I hope none of the movies that I selected triggered you too bad.
I wouldn't say they triggered me. One of them, and I'll let your listeners go and check out that episode. I won't spoil it, but one of the movies definitely struck a nerve with me. But it was done in such a beautiful way that I did feel good after watching it.
Good.
Um, yeah, so out of your three films, I think that was the one that, and I think you know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, yeah, it won an Oscar for Best Picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that was actually helpful watching that. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Mm. I've
Well,
heard the movie, just quickly on the topic of movies, I've heard the one that's probably the hardest to watch about having a sick child and the loss of a child is the film Lorenzo's Oil with Nick
I've never,
Nolte and Susan Sarandon.
I need to see that. I've heard of that and
Yeah,
I forgot all about that one.
yeah.
Have
I
you seen
have it on
it?
DVD. I just haven't watched it yet. It's sitting on my shelf, so I know it's going to be a hard watch, but
Oh,
I will watch it eventually. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say, me too, me too. I don't know why, but I guess because like I told you when I was on your podcast, I don't cry real easily, and sometimes you need to. I mean,
Mm,
and the movies kind of help me, give me a safe place to do that.
yeah.
And it's really
Yeah.
cathartic. But so
Hmm.
you started
Yeah.
though, I found doing this podcast, a lot of people, you say that we feel alone, but really we're not. There's a lot of people out there that have lost a child in one way or
Oh
another.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I found doing this podcast that a lot of people, with their grief, they do things like in honor of the death of the child. So like for you,
Mhm. Mhm.
you've been kind of working to create a legacy in Lucy's name to
Yes.
fight childhood cancer. Um,
Yes.
could you share a little bit more about that project and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for asking. Yeah. So it kind of started back when Lucy was diagnosed, and everyone wanted to hear how she was going, and were messaging us on Facebook. So my wife and I had the idea of starting a group on Facebook. We called it Lucy's Journey. and we would post updates on there and share information about DIPG as we were learning it. And then the links to the fundraising were all done there as well. So that was sort of set up to document her progress through the treatment and the trip to Queensland and all that stuff. Her journey after diagnosis was only 8 months. 8 months after diagnosis is when she passed away. Um, Within a couple of days after her passing, we launched Lucy's Legacy, as we call it, which we thought had the perfect sound, the perfect ring to it about, and what we wanted to do, which was to honor her legacy and the girl that she was. She was such a bright, bubbly little girl with lots of friends and was a friend to everyone and, had this infectious smile and lit up the room. She really was just this gorgeous little girl. And we started Lucy's Legacy to honor her, share memories of her and who she was for people who never got to meet her, and also to celebrate who she was, and to continue to raise awareness and funds for research into DIPG. So through Lucy's Legacy, we've created a relationship with the institute called Run DIPG. And that was started off as basically this researcher here in Australia called Matt Dunn. He and his wife Phoebe had a little girl who was diagnosed with DIPG a few years ago and lost her battle as well. And Matt Dunn is now fully dedicated to researching into DIPG, and he's like the lead researcher in Australia for this. And he ran a marathon. He's a runner, and he ran a marathon to raise funds for DIPG research, and then launched the Institute Run DIPG. So they organize a lot of events like marathons and things like that to raise money. And we linked in with them, and they have a lab at the University of Newcastle, which is near Sydney, Australia, not far from there. And from the government, they've received less than $1 million in funding from the government for DIPG, which is nowhere near enough. When you consider other cancers are given millions upon millions every single year. And don't get me wrong, all cancers are terrible and all research and funds are important, but DIPG gets overlooked. So because it is so rare, and I guess out of all the different cancers, brain cancer is the one that most people don't think of straight away, or may not associate with straight away, because it's overshadowed by a lot of these other more common cancers like breast cancer and prostate cancer and lung cancer and all these things. So brain cancer is sort of at the bottom of the list. And at the bottom of the brain cancer list is DIPG. Only about 20 children a year are diagnosed with that in Australia. In America, it's maybe around 300 to 400, I believe. So still low numbers, but every child who is diagnosed is losing the fight. So we thought we need to get word out there get people talking about DIPG, educate them on it, so then they can talk about it with their networks and the people they know, and work it into the conversation, into the conversation going on around the world about different cancers. So we started Lucy's Legacy, and we've done a bunch of different fundraisers, and our friends and people we don't even know have reached out to us saying they want to help, and they've organized fundraisers. We've had a big basketball game called Lucy's Game, which raised some money. A friend of mine from high school, her and her husband are mechanics and car enthusiasts, and they organized this charity drive where all these people we didn't know showed up in their beautiful cars, and we went for a drive and had lunch at a pub, and that raised nearly $1,000. My sister runs a dancing school, Irish dancing, and they did a special Irish dancing fundraiser at her competition, which she runs every year. We've done that twice now, and that's raised around $1,000 each time. So, and we've done other things, like we created these candles, which we call Light for Lucy, and it's got a picture of her on the candle, and people have bought those. And so all this money then gets funneled back into Run DIPG, because that's the one and only really institute leading the way into research for this particular cancer in Australia. So that's what we do, and we just talk about it with people as much as we can, and just get the word out there. So that's really our mission now.
that's awesome. I'm glad that you guys are doing that. I'm glad that that's helpful for you. Um,
Thank you.
yes, yes. And so to kind of um wrap things up a little bit, for those who may be listening and going through their own experiences of grief, which, like I said, I have a friend who lost a child just, I don't know, I think last month, in a car accident. So, like you said, it could be anything. But
Yeah,
for those
that's
who may
right.
be listening and going through their own experiences of grief, what advice or insights would you offer to help them navigate this challenging journey?
Yeah. Um, I think firstly, yeah, just remind people that they're not alone and that they don't have to do it alone. That, find the way that works for them, but be willing to lean on people and don't hide away from the world because that can make it feel 10 times worse. Confronting it is hard, but trying to ignore it altogether is going to be even harder because grief is ugly and it's unpredictable and it will just pop up when you least expect it.
Mm.
I've had times where I've been okay, around certain anniversaries I was okay, and then after that I would hit a wall and struggle with just day-to-day functions and dwell on why it happened. And I think we all go through that process and just allowing, as hard as it is, allow yourself to go through it and work through it step by step. Ignoring it or trying to numb it doesn't work. It just makes it worse, I think.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yeah, in whatever way someone chooses to do that, I think it's not something you ever really fully accept or understand, the loss of a child, and you don't get over it. You don't move on. You don't have to, but you can move forward.
Oh, that's
You
good.
know, that's been our takeaway from this is move forward. Learn to live with this as best as you can because it's with you now. And lean on people, reach out to people, and take it one day at a time. That has been a big help for me. Especially in the early days of after losing your child, it is very much a day by day process. Then I found for me personally, the days tend to be, can stretch out to maybe like a week. I sort of look, when it comes to grief, I think about what can I do this week, looking ahead. And I know with time it will not get easier, but we'll learn how to manage it better.
Right.
And we'll just eventually be like, yeah, this is our life now. We're getting older and watching our daughters, other two daughters grow up, but Lucy's not with us, and but we just preserve her memory as best as we can. Just take it
Right.
one step at a time. That's all you can do. There's
Yes.
no fix. There's no fix. There's no solution. You can't make it go away. It's something you'll carry with you forever. But you can move forward. You can live a life. You can have days of happiness again. Even if you're thinking about your child and try as hard as this is, try not to let the guilt or shame take over.
Mm.
Don't beat yourself up and say, I'm not allowed to be happy now because I've lost my child. Why am I not sick? Why am I still here? Like, don't beat yourself up. If you're still here, it's because you're here for a reason. Um,
Mm.
and just be okay with that. And if it means the happiness comes from thinking back to a really nice day that you had with your child, then so be it. But if the happiness is just because you did something for yourself and you're feeling good, that's all right as well. You don't have to feel guilty about that. We've as a parent lost a child, you've been through hell and back. So it's okay to feel good, and try and make those days a priority. Do what you can. So self-care, looking after yourself, treating yourself. That's all really important because as parents, you've got to be there for your kids as well.
Right, right. And that sounds like the last stage of grief, which is acceptance. And
I think so.
yes, and I like how you
Yeah.
say you don't move on, but you can move forward. And
Yeah.
with my child, her name was Sadie Marie. And
Beautiful name.
yes, thank you. And I will testify here that you mentioned, don't stuff it, don't try to you need to talk about it with people. And I will state how important that is because I don't know if it was well, I do know. It's because I lost mine to such traumatic circumstances. She
Mm,
was sickly, and we had some doctor's appointments with some specialists to find out what was going on. But on Mother's Day of all things, and that's another thing I think that triggered it really too, is
right.
I woke up on Mother's Day and I had rolled over on her on the couch and smothered her accidentally. And
Mm,
so I immediately stuffed it. I mean, my in my family we didn't know about, or we didn't, I guess, weren't real familiar with, counseling and reaching out. You just didn't do that. I mean, the way we were taught is something happened, you tough it up and
mm,
you use that to be who you are and you move on. And
yeah.
I couldn't, and because I really thought I was the only one. I mean, I thought, okay, maybe people have lost a child because of an accident or a sickness, but not
Mm,
like this. And I've looked it
mm,
up recently, and there's actually thousands of women that this has happened to, an
right.
accidental bed death. And so
Yeah.
I'm not a freak of nature. I'm not like,
No.
but for years and years and years, I didn't celebrate Mother's Day. We didn't talk about it. It was hush, 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 hush. And I carried that for, I don't know, probably, I don't know, 15 years or more. And
Yeah.
it demonstrated itself in some very ugly manners. I won't get into all that, but my listeners
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
know what I've been
Sure.
through. So
Yeah.
definitely I will echo the fact that reaching out to support groups, reaching out to family and friends, because while they can't understand, they can be there for you. People can
Yeah.
be there for you. And it's very, very, very important to let them, is we need each other.
Yes. Me too.
We do need each other, and we can get through this. Like you say, we don't ever get over it.
No.
And there's a reason for everything, and we don't know, but
Hmm.
we can definitely move forward. And like you say, you're still here. Um, for a reason. And I think that that's very important that we recognize that,
Yeah.
and we learn to take the good, because there is some good that can be gleaned from it in the end. And
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
you will definitely see her again.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I know I will. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, just going back to what you said about like how, there was a time where, if there was the grief associated with death, it was just like, okay, whatever, move forward. But we know so much more now about mental health and well-being and the consequences of not dealing with stuff and
Oh,
how that can impact your life. So we can't do that. We have to be okay with being vulnerable and
yes.
shedding and showing those emotions. It's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength.
Right.
It's about embracing every side of yourself and still loving yourself even on your hardest, darkest days. I think those are the days where you have to love yourself the most because this thing has happened to you and has happened to your child that is completely unfair and completely cruel and it sucks. Is this the most polite way I can say? There's other words I've used to describe it, but I won't say those words. But some days I just say those words. Whether it's yelling it into a pillow or just having a conversation with a friend and just saying, God, this just really, really bites, and it's okay to talk about it that way because every time you do, you release a little bit.
Right.
If
I
you
agree.
don't, you will bottle it up and it will show up in other ugly ways. It's like those persistent weeds that just keep coming back, Yeah, you can't, no, that's no way to live, So I've tried to be really proactive about that. And, I've met some other dads along the way who've lost children and, us men typically don't talk as much as women. I'm trying to be the exception to the rule, but I'm still a guy. I'm still going to disappear into my man cave, as I call it, which is my office, home office upstairs, and just lock myself away and do something. But you know, um, I've now had enough experiences where when I do that for too long, the it starts to show up in different ways, and that impacts on my ability to work, my ability to show up for people. So, if there's any dads out there listening, it's okay to talk, it's okay to cry, in front of other guys, and after that, you can have a laugh, have a beer, go do whatever you want to do, but don't hide those emotions away. Let them out.
Right. And really, if our children were still with us, that's not what they would want for us,
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I'm so I don't know if the word proud is the word to use, but I guess appreciative of you as a man for coming on and talking about such a difficult subject today. I really appreciate that. Um,
Thank you, Tony.
yeah, and it's been a pleasure, and I'm glad that we could
Yeah.
talk about such a difficult subject because people do need to have some hope, and they need to know that they're not
Hmm.
alone, and that
Yep.
there is hope at the end of the tunnel. Um,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah,
It's an ongoing conversation, and that's the thing. It's a conversation. It's a conversation you have with yourself, with people you already know, and all the new people that we're going to meet moving forward. We'll have this conversation with them as well. The less we talk about it, the less fear and stigma there is about it, and then more people know about it, and more people can do something about it. So, yeah, so thank you for having me on and allowing me to share Lucy's story and spread the word about DIPG. And yeah, hopefully it makes a bit of a difference for some people.
that's right. That's right. Amen. Okay, well, thank you so much, Brian. I've
Yeah,
enjoyed it. Stick around after we close just so
yeah,
I can chat with you
sure.
for a few more minutes. And just let me say to you all listening, if you want to find out more, Brian is on Facebook. Lucy's page is Lucy's Legacy page on Facebook, and he's also got a website, brianmcaleer.com. If you're interested in the movie podcast that we discussed, you can definitely, I'll let Brian share how you can find his YouTube channel, but mine is at the @ Grit and Grace dash podcast. If you should already know, but if you're new listening, that's my YouTube channel, and I have a playlist called shows I've appeared on, and it's then if you go to my movie story, it'll give you a link there to the episode I was on, Brian's episode, and then it'll if you just click his icon there, you can get to his channel that way. Brian, what is the name of your YouTube channel? Do you have it offhand?
Yes, it's called Aussie Goes Hollywood. So AUSSIE goes Hollywood. That's all one word. And that's where you'll find my podcast. And I have a Facebook page specifically for the podcast as well. That's just called My Movie Story. And it's also on all the podcast platforms as well.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and close this out for today. Brian, thank you again. And thanks for listening to another episode of the Grit and Grace podcast. Until next time, this is Tonya Bruton signing off.
Thank you,
And
Tonya.
thank you.